Hello, my name is Bradley Butler. I'm the Executive Director and Curator at Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs, New York. Thank you for joining us for the fourth of 5 artist talks with artists from Biblio Spectaculum, which is a national juried exhibition of artist books and text-based visual work from 33 artists from 12 different states. It was juried by Scott McCarney, who is an artist, educator, and designer from Rochester, New York. Next Friday, July 31st, is the last of our talks. We hope you'll join us again next week as well, when we tune in with a few more artists. These talks so far have been a great way for people to get to know the artists in our show, and the show is focusing on artist books and text-based work. So all of the artists that we've talked to so far have been working in that realm, and it's a great way to kind of get to know more artists if you are either an artist working with similar media or if it's just an interest of yours. So tonight I'm joined by 3 artists from New York State, so we've got Will Kaplan from Astoria, New York, Heather Swenson of Rochester, New York, and Cynthia Laureen Vogt from Brooklyn, New York. So thank you all for joining us. And what we're going to do is have each of them start by introducing themselves, telling us a little bit about their background or art practice more generally, and then each of them will get a chance to talk about the work that is included in the show. And you'll all get to see images of that work as well as we talk about it. If anyone has questions, just please type them in the comment section here on the Facebook Live feature, and we'll ask those as we go along. And also don't forget that you can see the exhibition for yourself. You can do that in 2 ways. If you are close by us here, you can visit us. Just go to mainstreetartscs.org and book an appointment. We are open for you to see the shows on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you are not local here, or you would rather watch things from afar, you can see the show in its interactive online format at interactive.mainstreetartscs.org, and you can scroll through the show, and it's almost as good as being here in person. I think that's all I have to say now. So first up, we've got Will Kaplan. So we will hand it over to Will.
Hello. So yeah, my name is Will Kaplan. I call myself a mixed media writing artist, which is, I guess, a convenient way to say that I dabble in writing, and that I also incorporate a lot of printmaking and collage into my practice. Generally, I'd say my work deals with maybe the border between the natural and the human-made. I grew up in New Jersey, so I grew up exploring nature preserves that were sort of right at the edge of the highway. So I think that's always kind of looming large in my work.
Okay, great. We will hear more from Will just shortly here. And so next we've got Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Swenson. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, mainly working in silkscreen right now, but also combining elements of drawing and small structures as well as installation into my practice. Recently, one of the bigger projects I had the last year, I had a public sculpture up at Rochester Contemporary Art Space in an outdoor green area for the last year. So that was an interesting mix of trying to bring some of my smaller sculptures into a larger scale, incorporating aspects of printmaking as well. And mainly I work with collections of observed images, kind of compiling visuals from my daily life, and then bringing all of those shapes and structures and colors into the studio, and then trying to compile them into a new space or a new story, I guess. And yeah, I'm just really interested in like the incidental facets of the built world. So kind of things that seem banal or maybe everyday or, seemingly boring, and then pulling the kind of the curiosity out of that and allowing people to hopefully see some more, I don't know, I guess, interest in everyday objects. So, yeah.
Great. And actually, Heather is going to be in our next exhibition here as well, the Print Club of Rochester Members Show. So if you get the chance to see her work in this show, then you get to see it again. So different work. So thank you. And we'll go on to Cynthia here.
First of all, I'd like to thank the juror, Scott McCarney, for including my work among that of so many amazing artists in this exhibition. And I'd also like to express my sincere gratitude to Bradley for all his incredible work. The installation looks fabulous, and I can just imagine how much work you've put into this show and all its various aspects. And I just want to say that in these challenging times when the arts are kind of struggling, it's really wonderful and heartening that this show is happening. So thank you. My background includes a formal education in fine art photography, which I turned to after years of serious dance study. And part of what interests me in photography is its unique way of imaging movement and time. For example, by using a slow shutter speed, one can capture in a photo the path of movement as ghostly tracers, revealing something we don't see with the naked eye. And I think of time, motion, and photography in relationship to language and how language originates in the body, but becomes somewhat abstracted through formalized speech and even further abstracted through writing systems. During my undergraduate years, I started pairing my own original text and photographs, and later layering photographs from Polaroids printed onto acetate transparencies using xerography or laser printing. And when a friend of mine who studied photography at RIT showed me her artist books combining journalistic text and photographs, I just fell in love with what she was doing. And a few years later, I came back to that idea of artist books and started creating my own. And I experimented rather broadly at first. Some of my early pieces were quite sculptural. I even did a couple of large wall-sized pieces with handmade paper and origami. But I've settled on the accordion fold format, which you'll see in my piece. It appeals to me for a number of reasons, primarily because it can be easily displayed, either unfolded and seen in its entirety, or experienced intimately as a book that is held in the hands while turning pages. And I also really like the rhythm that this form imposes as part of the composition. Working with collage developed naturally out of the layering with transparencies that I was doing as I began cutting away certain areas and using the edges as a formal element. I also like combining paper and transparencies and what that can do. But the term collage is almost a misnomer for my pieces because it comes from the French word for glue. And my works are mostly, well, almost entirely sewn together for the very practical reason that glue doesn't work well with transparencies. But I also like the feminist aspect in sewing. And that feminist perspective also informs how I think about time. Most of us think of time as linear, but it's also cyclical and complex, with many things occurring simultaneously at any given moment. It's layered. But it also includes absence, as the jazz pianist Vijay Iyer once said in a New Yorker interview, time is a ghost. And I just loved that because it's poetic and very accurate. Absence is also a part of language because words generally signify what isn't here or can't be simply seen and pointed at. And why write something? Because I'm not close enough to vocalize my communication, or because I want something to be communicated after I'm gone. In other words, it's meant to be partaken of when I'm absent. I describe my work as focusing on the mechanics of language, how it works, which includes this absence as well as pattern and rhythm. And I'll just wrap up by mentioning I've also explored other mediums, including video, both as source material and as an end in itself. Photography and cinema have an interesting relationship. But artist books have been my primary artistic output for over 25 years. That said, I don't really think of myself as a book artist.
Great. Well, thank you. And we'll get to see a lot of things you were describing shortly here when we share your images. So thank you. And so now we'll go back to Will here, and I will do some screen sharing, and we'll be able to see the work. So this is all work that's included in the show. And Will, go ahead.
Great, thank you. It was nice to hear about both of your practices. A lot that I relate to, a lot that was very illuminating, so I feel at home. So about this work, this book is called Fumarial, and I use book forms really as a sketchpad substitute. So, you know, an accordion like this is usually with me when I'm on the subway or just sort of waiting around or at home. And they're just to sort of collect quick sketches, musings, things that I might come back to later or not. And this book it's a particularly personal one. I began it during a week where I lost both an uncle and a dog. So yeah, it was a period of mourning, I guess, that this was capturing. And I'd say that's probably most apparent through the text. That's, I think, where I'm being the most vulnerable or straightforward about what I'm feeling. The imagery itself is really drawings mostly from the windows of subways and trains that I was taking back and forth between New Jersey to be with family and then back home here to the city. And that sort of landscape as it transitions between these patches of forest and greenery and parks, and then in the window you'll see like a burst of suburban homes, and then like just intense industrial scenes. So, you know, that in itself felt like it was really relating to what I look for in my practice in the first place, just where nature and industry interact, or how they coexist. And I'd say it just felt also like just a way of maybe capturing some of where my family is from. Yeah. I was going to say more, and I guess it's escaping me at the moment.
Well, you know, this is very much about the imagery, but also about the text. And so where does that come from in your background? I mean, do you have just equal interest in writing and, you know, drawing and painting, or you know?
So yeah. I majored in English with concentration in nonfiction writing. So the impulse to write is one I'm familiar with. It's one that I can sort of lean into or tap into a little bit. You know, I think as Cynthia was saying, you know, the words can do what the images can't. You can't really, I mean, I'm not going to be able to really draw out what I'm feeling, as well as I might just be able to string it into some words. The drawn elements, sort of my surroundings, give, I guess, like a bit of setting to this. And okay, what I'm remembering now is that, you know, this, I carried this book with me. I filled it up sort of in the last week of February, first week of March. So it was really right as the wave of the virus was starting to crest, especially here in New York. So in a way, it felt like I was like I guess my feeling of grief was in a way sort of bracing myself for, I guess, the intense period of isolation that was ensuing. I think just by virtue of reading the headlines, I could kind of tell, like, you know, I think a lot of people are going to be feeling what I'm feeling right now. And I think that's also something I was really, I guess, trying to lean into a bit.
Yeah, and since the pandemic had an effect on this exhibition, and this was supposed to be in May, we ended up having to push the deadline back 2 different times. So, you know, you're not the only one that, you know, was able to submit work that was so fresh either, which is, I think, interesting because, I mean, a lot of the time artists are, you know, pushing it right up to the deadline and trying to make new work for a show they're submitting to, but not always, you know, and people are not always able to submit work that's so fresh to a show. So
I think the glue may have been drying when I submitted this.
And when you're making, because I mean, I assume that you made the book as well.
Yeah, I did the binding.
So when you do, do you have an idea of what this book is going to be while you're binding it, or is it just like, well, this is going to just be the next book I'm working on, but I don't know what the content is yet?
Probably more the second. You know, I think I usually start with maybe some scraps of paper that I have lying around and say, like, well, this'll just be an accordion. It's all I can get out of this. Or if I have maybe a bigger piece and want to try a different form, then I might do that. You know, I've had X books, snake books that come with me. And there's some interplay between the form I have and what I'm putting in it, but I try not to formalize it too much from the start. It's kind of there for me to be using as a sketch pad. You know, once it starts filling up, you know, I might try to, I guess, sort of formalize it a little bit, make some more decisions about how it will be bound and presented. Great.
Well, anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. And if you're following along, you can see that we've been posting, or Sarah's been posting from behind the scenes, links as we go along related to what's being talked about. So link to Will's website and also the interactive show. So
thank you.
So up next, we've got Heather.
Yeah, so Will, I definitely relate to what you were talking about as far as, you know, I like that you were drawing out of the subway windows as things pass, because that's definitely something, you know, in my work, driving around, at least upstate, you know, being able to see things as I'm passing, and that ends up coming into my work quite a bit. This book, though, that was in the show is somewhat of a departure from my usual work. It's kind of a side project that I've been working on for almost 6 years now, that I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to turn into. So I've been collecting envelope interiors, like I said, for the last 6 years. And I noticed, you know, once I started opening mail and noticing that each envelope often has a different interior, a different pattern that lines the envelope, you know, to protect information within the envelope, I started getting really curious about, you know, why there were so many, and just some of them were really interesting patterns. And so I started, you know, telling friends and family that I was collecting these patterns. And so people started saving them for me. My grandmother worked at a dentist office and was, you know, she opened the mail there. So she was mailing me, you know, cut out sections of envelopes. And so these were just kind of sitting in a drawer in my studio for a long time. And then I had a residency came up, an application for the IEA Experimental Projects Residency at Alfred University. And it was project-based and it was a week long. So I applied with this idea, saying that I wanted to do some type of cataloging with my security tints collection. And thankfully I got into the residency and it was great. I had access to a a wonderful print shop again and bookbinding resources during that week. So this book is basically a kind of what it says, a pocket guide to envelope interior. So I went through, I think I had about 100 patterns at the time, which has now grown since then. But I went through and I categorized them based on shape and pattern. So the first few days we scanned all of them, and then I went through and started to try to group them. So these two images that are on the screen right now was a page spread from the static category. Other categories were, fleck or diamond. And so I just tried to group things similarly together. And I guess what this does connect with my overall practice is, again, kind of like the magic of observation and like the curiosity of every day. Like, so many people that I talked to about this book, all of a sudden they were opening envelopes and getting really excited about checking in the mail and seeing what pattern. And then, I still get people sending me images of, oh, do you have this pattern? Do you have this pattern? So yeah, I think it felt really great to have this long-term project kind of culminated into a book, an edition that I was able to finish at the residency. So they're all digital prints on Juan paper with a BFK like cover, and they're all hand folded. So I was able to, it was a really physical process. And yeah, it's just been really exciting to kind of sort through and now have this little reference guide of security tints. And I guess conceptually kind of what it says about protecting information and using. I've used some of these patterns in other works recently. I screen printed a pattern onto fabric and sewed a tent from it. So kind of working with some sculptural pieces as well, being able to enter into a space protected by a security tent. And, what does that mean for the viewer entering into a space like that? Yeah, so I guess I would just encourage everybody to when they open their mail, look on the inside of the envelope first before you throw it out. There's some really incredible patterns.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those things that you probably have never thought about, right? In your life, like, there's millions of letters that go out there every day, but the average person is not going to really think about all the different patterns that exist on the inside of these things until maybe you have two of them open at once, kind of looking at it like you are now, and wow, I wonder what else is out there. So I think that
I ran into weirdly a woman that used to work at an envelope printing factory, and she told me that I was like, oh my gosh, tell me everything. And she said that there was this really big book. So some companies would request, a personalized security tint. Like in the book, I have one from Waste Management and a recycling company. So some companies would ask for, a custom logo, their logo built into the envelope, and other people that didn't have a preference would just get to look through this giant book of patterns and then just select one. So it's kind of interesting to think that, there's a larger book out there somewhere that is basically the actual field guide to envelopes. So kind of viewing this as a sister book to that, is interesting too. So yeah, I would really love to find that book one day and just see, the full expanse of patterns that they used to offer.
Wow. And did she share with you any really interesting or strange patterns or?
Not, I guess not, not in particular. There's definitely, I have, in the back of the book, there's an anomalous category because there were some patterns that I couldn't figure out how to group them. They weren't like anything else. So those are in the back of the book, and there's some pretty strange ones back there. So yeah. And I do have, so I had only made 8 during the residency, and there was a lot of interest in the book, kind of more so than I expected actually. And so I launched a Kickstarter last year to be able to print a larger run of the book. So now I have, those available at a, more reasonable price, and trying to get them into a few, small bookstores and things. Just, because yeah, I think it would be great to kind of share that a little bit more, have it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, that's great. And any plans for future books?
I've been not exactly with the security tints, but I've been working on some screen printed accordion folds right now. I think one that's actually in the members show next month. So yeah, I do definitely like playing around with, you know, book structures as far as how it fits with silkscreen. I feel like it's a good counterpart with printmaking. So yeah, I have a couple in the works, just small things, but nothing as large as this project. This one ended up being 96 pages, which was a lot. And I was really excited that I actually got it to be 1/4 of an inch thick, or that felt like an accomplishment. So
Yeah, it's kind of deceiving because I mean, it's definitely thick book, but you know, it's like, wow, there are a lot of images in here, and it's really you know, rewarding and to look through the whole thing because there's a lot to look at.
yeah.
So, and actually, you can, if you go to the interactive version of our show, you can you know, you can see someone's hands flipping through the book, so you can see every spread. And actually, you can see that for each of the 3 artists we're talking to today. You can see their books in that way online. So, well, great. Well, thank you, Heather.
Yeah, thank you for everything with the show and for putting up a virtual exhibition. That's great.
Yeah, it's you know, by now Sarah and I have it figured out. So it still takes a little bit of time, but it's because you're starting from scratch every show, even though you have the same basic thing. But it's we got to figure it out, I think. So we're going to be doing that for shows at least through the year here. So
Cool.
yeah. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Cynthia.
Okay, so this piece is titled "Where Will That Get You?" and it's one of 2 works that I did very similarly in this high contrast black and white. I wanted it to be very dark, and it plays abstracted figures off of realistic photographs of 3-dimensional alphabetical letters. And that comes from my thoughts about language originating in the body, but becoming more abstracted through writing. And one of my sources of inspiration for this work, as well as quite a number of my pieces, is Jacques Derrida's collection of essays titled Paper Machine. And that's the English translation of the French title papier machine, which actually refers to a kind of typing paper on a roll that I guess they have in Europe, or they used to have in Europe. And something he writes about is the question of what is paper in philosophical terms related to language. And he mentions the very simplistic idea of paper as the ground or support of text, correlating with the body as the ground or support of thought, language, and sound, but then sort of refutes this idea through a line of inquiry, which he explores in depth. But it all struck a chord with me. So I was playing off of some of these ideas by using photographs of wooden block letters to emphasize the physical nature of text and its relationship to the body rather than ethereal thought. And then those images are printed on paper, creating a kind of doubling of materiality. And then if I cut a letter out, that can further augment that object corporeality, or conversely, I can use a part with the negative area to create or emphasize its absence. So rather than the meaning of words created by combinations of sound that letters symbolize, I'm interested, as I mentioned earlier, in the patterns and rhythms inherent in all forms of language. And this piece was done as general in my process, starting out with an idea or concept, and then creating images from photographs or video, after which I do quite a bit of cutting to create the pieces with which to start laying out the work. And putting pieces together for me is mostly a process of discovery. Very often the work itself kind of decides where it wants to go, almost in spite of what I thought I was trying to do. And I end up having to negotiate my preconceived ideas with what the work is actually becoming. And typical in this piece, as in much of my work, is an alternating of reflective areas where the acetate transparencies are with the opaque paper areas, which is difficult to get a sense of on a computer monitor. You really have to see the pieces in person. And the predominance of black paper areas behind the acetate in this piece enhances some of that reflective quality. And I'm always looking for ways to express movement in work that is visually still. And one way that happens is when a viewer moves in front of the work in such a way as to create shifting reflections and shadows in the acetate. But unique to this piece, you can see a little bit on the outer edges. And the other one I did it around the same time is the use of dashed lines to indicate motion, which is something you see in cartoons. So it's a little cartoony.
Yeah, and the thing that I really like, I'll go back to the first slide here. You know, you've got different angles within the images, but then there's also the different angles from the way the book is displayed, because it's, you know, it's an accordion and it's made to stand up. So, you know, it really has this, I don't know, interplay of different angles coming through in the images and also the physical piece. And I think that that creates a really interesting experience for viewing. Great.
It creates some depth to it as well, a sense of visual space in the piece.
Yeah, and you had there were two end pieces and a ribbon that came in the package, you know, to keep this all together. And that there was a note in there like, you know,
Don't display that.
Yeah, these are not meant to be displayed. And I was like, oh, but it's such a great experience to, you know, to untie this and then, you know, take it out. So that was interesting. It was just the really fancy packaging. So yeah, great. All right, great. Anything else to share about the piece then?
Not really. You can. That's a good image where you can see the two eyes, where the white areas are cut away, and then there's something behind it. And another thing that I really liked in this piece was the black on black that's happening in certain areas where I have transparencies with black overlaying a black area. I kind of liked how that worked out.
Yeah, great. All right, well, great. Well, thank you. Let's see here. I'll stop the screen sharing here. Well, great. Well, well, I didn't stop it yet. Hold on. There it is. Okay, now you're all back. Well, unless anyone out there has a quick question here, I think we have reached the end of the talk here. So I'll just remind everyone out there, MainStreetArtsCS.org is where you can go to book an appointment on a Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday from 11 to 6. You'll have 45 minutes to see the show, and we do appointments on the hour, so you can just do that very easily online. And you can also go to interactive.mainstreetartscs.org to scroll through the show as if you're walking through it. And you can click on each piece, view more information, and if the work happens to be for sale, you can also go to the online store. So I'd like to thank each of you artists for joining me tonight on this Facebook Live artist talk. It's always enlightening, and it's great to see different connections between what people are saying, either, you know, all in this week or in the you know, previous weeks. So it's always interesting to see, you know, how people from different sides of the country working in different, you know, artistic disciplines, you know, how similar we all are sometimes. So thank you. And again, thank you all out there. And join us next week for our last talk with 4 more artists in the show. So that's it. So take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.